This is Dave with a quick Cyberchat live stream. The call-in number is 1-855-877-5112. Give me a call. Sound off about the topic of today, which is so much fun, abortion. I just had to sound off about this because who isn't, right? And I wanted to direct everybody to our website, ztitic.news, and just point out, we've been talking about this subject since our inception, and we have a dedicated news aggregator here in the news section, as you can see if you're following along on the live stream here, where we pull in different videos and articles related to the subject of abortion and life, and this very controversial subject, which has been with us, if you're 50 years old, it's been a big part of the political dialogue your whole life. And so we definitely have exposed some of the nefarious goings on with the abortion industry, which it's industrialized, the flesh market, I'll just leave it there. It really encompasses the whole body. I mean, just like cattle almost, we boil the bones for broth, we harvest the blood, we put it into dog food, we sell the steaks, cut up the fat, render it down. I mean, everything is used. And why would humans being any different? The most precious commodity that there is. So we talked about it last episode. That was before the Supreme Court decision, although there have been rumors of this coming down the pipe, perhaps leaked drafts and whatnot. And the big debate with CNN has been around, is this intentionally premeditated being done at this time because they want to foment civil unrest, or is it really true that, Trump put in a bunch of liberty-loving Supreme Court justices who are going to sort of take the country back one ruling at a time? If you listen to the right, they're definitely celebrating. If you're listening to the left, they're lamenting. They feel like this is a loss. So whether it was premeditated to cause, more division or not, that is definitely happening. But I am going to make the case today that it's still a positive thing, because it's so expository. We are having a dialogue which needs to be had, and what better way to have it than to have this sort of debate? And if you actually understand anything about government and how our system works, there are checks and balances, and there's territorial sovereignty and jurisdictions. And I think to put the decision on this subject back into the hands of at least a more local representation of what the people think and feel about it is certainly better than a top-down federal precedent, which has been used for that duration of time, 50 plus years, to justify almost no limitation on abortion. So I don't see how, if you're cognizant of what abortion is, which is baby murder, I don't know how you can't see this at least as some net positive, even if in the short term there's chaos. We've seen with the BLM riots and stuff, there's financing going into the rioting activity specifically. So I don't think the answer is certainly not to hold up Roe v. Wade to prevent division. That's not the answer. I think we just have to, cooler heads need to prevail, and we need to just be talking intelligently. And I think before anybody goes and sounds off about it, they should probably read the actual ruling and actually look into the history, because a lot of people are talking about this and don't even know the history of Roe v. Wade and what a fraud it was. Turns out, Roe's still alive, wasn't aborted. And they made arguments in the case Roe, which set this precedent, which, the court is now overruling, because, some of the arguments go back to like the 14th Amendment, which prior to the 14th Amendment, and that wasn't passed in order to justify abortion. It was only justified after the fact, using the 14th Amendment and the right to privacy and other amendments, as to why this should be a quote right. Prior to the 14th Amendment, it's stated here in that more than 2/3 of the states had already considered abortion to be a crime. So there was a lot of like precedent already on the books from the state's perspective, saying that this was a crime. So to then say, well, the 14th Amendment established, this right, is a faulty premise. And, reading the actual ruling, one will have to do a bit of further research on some of these terms, because it's a legal issue. And they say here, well, first of all, this came to the Supreme Court because of an abortion clinic basically objecting to a Mississippi state law, the Gestational Age Act, which provided that, except in a medical emergency or in the case of a severe fetal abnormality, a person shall not intentionally or knowingly perform or induce an abortion of an unborn human being if the probable gestational age of the unborn human being has been determined to be greater than 15 weeks, which is basically where you can scan the anatomy, get the heartbeat, and all of that stuff. So this foundational argument of abortion, like most people who say they're pro-choice are saying, well, we can have it as long as it's rare, safe, and in these exceptional circumstances. So that was the foundational argument, which was used and has been used forever. And that's still written into the Mississippi Code. It's not like they banned abortion. They just banned it after 15 weeks. And this abortion clinic, said that was unconstitutional because, we have this right to an abortion, I guess, anytime thereafter, is what they're saying. And the critical question to the court was whether the Constitution properly understood conferred a right to obtain an abortion. And they cited Roe and then a lower court, Casey, an appellate court case, which they, upon further review, it skipped over the question of constitutional right to an abortion and simply reaffirmed Roe on the basis of stare decisis. So if you go look up stare decisis, it's a doctrine of policy or following rules or principles laid down in a previous judicial decision. So basically they're saying here, Casey said that Roe said that we have a right. And so that's the whole basis. Well, if Roe didn't properly establish that, then you can't use Casey as you can't use that as a citation. And so, what is stare decisis? I mentioned that. Another term to look up is rational basis of review. So Roe held that an abortion right is part of a right to privacy that springs from the 1st, 4th, 5th, 9th, and 14th Amendment. The Casey court grounded its decision solely on the theory that the right to obtain an abortion is part of the liberty protected by the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. Others have suggested that support can be found in the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, but that theory is squarely foreclosed by the court's precedents, which establish that a state's regulation of abortion is not a sex-based classification and is thus not subject to the heightened scrutiny that applies to such classifications. Next, the court examines whether the right to obtain an abortion is rooted in the nation's history and tradition and whether it is not an essential component of the ordered liberty. And, you know, the liberty term itself is controversial. It's they even say it doesn't provide enough guidance. You know, if we're going to, you know, just write a blank check for liberty, you know, and we get into a legal dispute, we actually have to look into not just the law as it's written, but the intent of the law and the history that led to the writing of a law or a judicial precedent. So, you know, you can go on and continue to read this, but it's pretty obvious that, you know, the foundations of Roe were just not there. If you consider the history before some of the protections that they're claiming, you know, that are protected in this case. So that's all very fascinating to look at and understand. But at the same time, you know, with this, you have the exposition of hypocrisy. And that's what I think is so positive, because you have all these people who ironically are like anti-gun, most of them, but they're pro-choice. So they're purportedly against violence, but then they're pro-violence against the most innocent people you can imagine. Of course, they have these flimsy foundations like, well, what about rape? You know, and it's interesting because, you know, not even the woman who's raped can kill the rapist legally unless it's in self-defense at the time. But she can kill the innocent baby resulting from the rape under, you know, these flimsy conditions. And also, if you look at the statistics, you know, 0.00% of the abortions that happen are in these really extreme circumstances of rape, incest, and medical necessity. Of course, you know, now we argue mental health as a medical necessity. Well, I just don't want to deal with it. So, you know, that's my mental health. So that's a medical necessity, you know, life-saving, right? You know, whatever. But you've got Maxine Waters out there. These people of her ilk have been relying on the Supreme Court for so long as to why we've made so much progress. But now that they've basically done an about face on themselves and more or less corrected their legal foundations, they're trash. They're trash. And Maxine didn't say this, but others have. Like, we need to take the justices out and gun them down. Okay, so these anti-gun people, supposedly anti-violent, supposedly pro-law, pro-democracy, pro-our system, but now that their precious sacrament, ritual, sacrifice, covenant, you know, gospel is overruled, you know, well, we just have to abort the Supreme Court. It's quite hilarious. And another good source to see the hypocrisy is a Twitter, Libs of TikTok. They do a good job of exposing the hypocrisy. You know, man on the street interviews or other videos in these pride parades where people are talking about, you know, I'm here for bodily autonomy. And it's like, well, what about the vaccine? And they're like, oh, well, that's different. You know, the whole that's different principle, which is the basis of hypocrisy itself. You know, all these meltdowns, people whose lives really aren't going to change at all. And the other thing is, abortion's not over. They're acting like it's over. It's like, no, you still have states who are out of their mind, like North Carolina, and just want to, you know, harvest the little flesh ball of meat, you know, to quote Alex Jones, making fun of Northam in Virginia, who, man, he's a wraith.
Because we've decompartmentalized.
Didn't see
we
that,
keep them comfortable.
But I am very, very concerned with late-term abortions.
We don't want, it's a 3-minute clip, pull it up. We don't want the government involved. The doctors and the mother who's drugged up, you didn't say that, are going to decide about the future. And maybe she keep baby alive a week. Maybe she decided to get rid of baby. He goes, well, sometimes the baby is deformed. No, they want the organs. If they can kill a baby after it's born, because sometimes they deformed. You know, see, sometimes they deformed. Here's the key. They're like, why are we wasting this 7 pounds of meat? Where they go, oh, we consider the baby dead. The mother decided it didn't live. If she decides we resuscitate and it lives, but it didn't resuscitate, its flesh, it's a legalese, it's passed into a special ward with doctors that make a few million a year.
Yeah, so all jokes aside, Alex is right, and we've posted a lot of good material on our Telegram. If you're not part of the Telegram, go over to ztitic.news. That's the easiest way. There's a button on the right-hand side. Click join the Telegram channel. We have discussions, post content links. But there was somebody posted a screenshot of a Scientific America article about this, where quantum mechanics is informing us about abortion. They actually cited the double slit experiment, where the observer basically determines the behavior of matter. And this is a longstanding problem for physicists, because they don't believe in anything outside of what they can see. But they're actually citing that as, you know, how we can, like to Alex is saying, well, it's just a legalese. We just call it a different thing, and it's not. So that's like the biggest dividing line, is if somebody can't accept that it is actually murder, what's happening, you know, I don't know how we're ever going to come to some sort of consensus, but one way or the other, we're going to have to, because we can no longer use the Roe v. Wade Foundation to write this blank check for abortion. All the states are going back to whatever previous state law there was, and that might change for the better or worse, depending on where you are. So in that way, it's actually, people are getting more choice, which is funny, because it's the pro-choice people who are upset. And we haven't even talked about yet all these companies coming out and saying they're going to pay for travel costs so that women can get their abortion. And what a sneaky PR stunt that is. And we can talk about that with one of our call-in. We got a call-in here. I'm going to cue you in, and we'll do a quick sound test, make sure I can hear you. But I've said a lot. Hopefully you've been listening. And what's your name, and where are you from?
Oh, it is Xavier Diamond.
Oh, shit! Xavier! Thanks for calling in.
Hey, absolutely, my man. Hold on just a second. Let me mute the YouTube right quick.
Go for it.
All right, can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right, word. Let's see. You're a little bit in the background. I'm going to turn my volume.
I just stepped away
up
for a minute.
all the way here. All right, I can hear you. Yeah, excellent discussion topic for this late June day. I was listening in, and one thing that kind of struck me, just to play, and I agree with everything you've been saying, but just to play my co-host's sort of alternative devil's advocate sort of argument, is we've not only had this practice so ingrained over the past 50 years, so it's really the better part of almost really 3 generations of people, and the programming and the propaganda that all these different demographics, for example, have received, have rendered abortion a kind of rite of passage, almost, a kind of ritualistic necessity. And, you know, I see all these various articles. You know, you've got Church of Satan and rabbis and, you know, interfaith groups and synagogues and stuff saying, look, you know, abortion is a right within our religion. You know, this is an infringement on religious freedom, which is highly, maybe a little too revealing about the underlying basis of these various organizations, which is thanatoid hyperbole. You know, they have to render death-based double standards as the front line.
This is why
of
the
their
control
thinking.
of the language is so important, because if we go, redefining man and a woman, and again, that's another hypocrisy here, is amidst all this chaos over Roe v. Wade, kind of juxtaposed to it, you have this huge trend of ideating that men can be pregnant. And I mean, we talked about it with the Women's Birth and Wellness Center, how they're saying, what we recognize a lot of our patients, don't identify as women, even though they're here for birth services and stuff like that. Well, that's kind of, part of the whole equation. They need to basically redefine murder so that we can incorporate it into our Bill of Rights. I mean, you underscore a good point. I mean, if you can say, if you can't agree that it's murder in the womb and it's part of your religion, well, they can easily make that argument after the fact too, after birth.
Mm-hmm.
So,
sure.
And that's all through just like Alex said, a legalese or color of law or linguistic trick.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing is, just to expand on that topic is, also think about it this way. It was a eugenics practice, more or less. I mean, you had Margaret Sanger essentially targeting undesirable populations, which was actually not specifically a racial category. It was anyone who was considered basically mentally defective.
Well, so you bring up a perfect point. I wanted to I have an article about that. And I wanted to tie it in, right? So Maxine Waters reacts to Dobbs' ruling. To hell with the Supreme Court. We will defy them. I don't agree with her over what you want to defy them over, but in a sense, I empathize with her sentiment, because if the Supreme Court is not some beacon of justice, as they would have us believe, although it's interesting, the pro-choice people have lauded them as such for passing Roe v. Wade to begin with, but they pass, in my opinion, illegal stuff all the time. You look at the infamous 1927 eugenics decision, and I think James Iredell brought this up on our show before, the Buck v. Bell,
Oliver Wendell Holmes,
where they ruled 8-1 that a poor white woman from Virginia should be sterilized for eugenics reasons. And basically they concluded that, we had to do this because if we allow it, the society's going to be swamped with incompetence and it'll end up sapping the strength of the state. And what's interesting about that, if you read the Supreme Court Justice ruling, they talk about, the liberty, which is argued to be protected by these amendments in the Roe v. Wade case. They had to, the petitioners were challenging that on a rational basis review, which is basically like, are these rationally related to a legitimate government interest? And it was Roe v. Wade, like you said, a eugenics basis, like ideology that came to agree with this idea in the first place. Like, hey, if these people want to kind of kill their babies because they can't take care of them, well, let's let them, because we're not going to be able to take care of them if they have them and then they become wards of the state. So that is the eugenics mentality, the rational basis review for the argument in Roe v. Wade, which is now being overturned. So,
it makes you think, like, is there a strategy about sort of a Cloward and Piven style finally completely break the United States, since the majority of people who receive these abortions are going to now need to draw, hundreds of billions of dollars more in welfare payments. So this is a perfect timing for something like a central bank digital currency to roll out over the next few years, as a mandatory basis to allow this burgeoning population, basically this new nation that's going to essentially replace the heritage population over the next 20 years.
Hey, you created this problem, government, which is forcing me to have pregnancy. and have this kid, now you need to take care of him. You didn't let me abort him, so now you need, and then that's the new voting block, and of course they can, and I had this.
We keep the babies alive.
Sorry, I had this also as part of the ZNN story. Just look at this. This woman is pregnant. She's got written on her pregnant belly, it says "not yet human," out there protesting for abortion. And so what kind of kid, I mean, she's probably going to have the kid, but like, what kind of kid is she going to raise?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big, I mean, I'm just thinking about it from sort of a geopolitical, strategic, big picture kind of point of view. And while it is absolutely the case that it is murder and it's morally objectionable, the composition and the construction of the society and government and state and nation that we have today is vastly different than it was 50 years ago when this particular ruling happened. And so I think you're going to have a bunch more new cases come up that basically re-solidify this, what was formerly a eugenics position, and is now just going to become sort of a pragmatist position. And so it's interesting that you see this sort of philosophical backdooring into the consciousness of the populace of what was formerly considered basically elitism. You could now see new cases and new issues come up where it's a simple pragmatic possibility and requirement in order to maintain the actual funding mechanisms of the government. And see, that's of course a bait and switch, because the reality is they can print as much money as they want. There's an infinite amount of expiry dollars, for example, that they could just generate through a central bank digital currency and just give to anyone who happens to qualify for it. And guess who's not going to qualify for it? It's really the sort of bigger issue here.
And after the chickens don't come home to roost because they burned all of the factories down, people are going to be begging for that welfare.
100%, and they're going to be begging for a legacy population that actually has a sense of duty to the maintenance of civil conditions.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of fascinating, really volatile, of course, but highly propitious opportunities here.
Yeah, yeah. It's very expository, and it's a conversation that has to be had.
Absolutely. Because you've had this propaganda for so long, it's almost like they're taking off the mask a little bit and saying, we don't think we even need this particular technique anymore. We think that the established patterns and behaviors amongst all the constituent demographics in this country are going to still accomplish the same ends that we want by intergenerational programming methods. And I think that there's something to be said about that argument, which is, so-called white, so-called heritage Americans, I think, have been beaten down for so long. They see the kind of the writing on the wall and the dangers in the future, and that kind of censors their birth rate. And it simultaneously, there's been all this patterned association with new populations, quote unquote underserved or underprivileged populations, where they just get free money all the time. So I think, and then they're the overall main recipient, proportionally. I think it also affects white birth rates as well. But I part of me thinks that it's the influence of Marxist, neo-Marxist attitudes amongst 30, 40 something, childbearing age whites that are going to see this, again, eugenics come pragmatism, philosophical backdoor become a reality. If they want to maintain any sort of semblance of a nation that actually honors their presence in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it is funny seeing some of the leftists reacting to this like, well, I'm just going to be abstinent now if I can't get an abortion. It's like, okay. Okay.
Okay. So I think there is going to be sort of a self-sorting mechanism there, and it's an interesting development because on the one hand, usually because of this particular programming, sort of a short circuit of it is only the people who really have enough courage or confidence in some way, shape, or form will end up having children.
Life
but the issue is on the flip side is there's a lot of populations in this country who have the confidence in the state as a proxy to raise their kids. And so that then brings the whole Cloward and Piven strategy, which is using the welfare state or some sort of hyperbolization of that welfare state to justify the complete conversion of the old legacy economic order in the United States towards a governance sort of centrally planned technocratic model that, of course, is going to be run by, people who are confused about, the binary nature of our species, So this is where it becomes a kind of interesting geopolitical play here on the grand chessboard, as it were, because it's sort of a wild card. It's a little bit of a toss-up. I think morally it makes a lot of sense, and it's a conversation that nationally is sort of, in a way, steered by a resurgence in what I would call sort of neo-Romanism, where specifically in the Catholic Church, I think is where we get a lot of this absolutist teaching about the foundation, nature, beginning of life. And that's now becoming a very much a judiciating consciousness, because you have several Catholics on the Supreme Court, and that's almost kind of a theocratic. There's a grain of truth in the sort of lefty indignation about, we're having a theocracy,
By the same token,
now.
By the same token, you have Pelosi and Biden claiming to be Catholic, but are on the totally opposite side of that spectrum.
Precisely, which shows you the schizophrenic core of their shared affiliation.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, really good comment, Xavier. I appreciate you calling in. I'm going to end the stream now. I want to keep it kind of short. We're at 35 minutes now, so we'll get this uploaded, and we'll try to do these more often. Y'all,
dude, absolutely. It's fun, man. The Cyberchats are really cool because you can get in a really concentrated topic. I love it.
Yeah, and sometimes we get kind of ADD on the program because there's just so much to talk about, and it's good to sort of focus in and hone in on things. But I just want to say, if you're listening in on YouTube, head over to our other channels. There are links in the description. If you like this, of course, do the obligatory like and subscribe shit. Bookmark our ztitic.news website, and don't forget to click that Telegram button on the right-hand side so you can join and contribute for shows like this, and keep up to date with everything we're doing at ztitic.news. Xavier, you have a good day, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely, bro. Thank you. Peace.